In 1981, Ford Motor Company signed a deal with a company that was defaulting on $4.15 billion in debt and renegotiating its entire financial existence with 225 creditor banks. That company's engineers handed Ford the most overbuilt diesel V8 ever installed in a civilian American pickup truck. Ford put it in the F-350, stamped the word diesel on the valve cover, and went back to selling trucks. The farmers and ranchers and contractors who bought those trucks in 1983 never knew where the engine came from. Ford did not tell them. The engine did not need them to know. They found out the same way every owner of one of these trucks finds out, by watching it not break. 1,200 miles north of the Texas Panhandle, a cattle rancher in Laramie, Wyoming, walked into a Ford dealership in the fall of 1983 and asked one question. He wanted to know if the diesel F-350 could pull a loaded horse trailer through the mountains in January without stopping. The salesman said yes. The rancher wrote a check. What that check bought him, under a hood that said nothing about the origin of what was inside, was an engine with 4-bolt main bearing caps, a forged steel crankshaft, oil-cooled pistons, and a gear-driven injection pump. The company that designed it had been manufacturing military cargo trucks for the United States Marine Corps since 1942. The year Ford signed that supply deal, that same company was negotiating with 225 banks to restructure more than $4 billion in debt. The rancher did not know any of this. The valve cover said Ford Diesel. The rest was not discussed. The men who bought these trucks in 1983 were getting something older and more capable than anything Ford had engineered on its own, and Ford arranged it so they would never need to think about that. 3 things about this engine and this deal have never been fully explained together. The first is why Ford would stake its entire heavy-duty truck future on a company that was, by every financial measure, in the process of collapsing. The second is what a company that spent 40 years building military and government fleet hardware had to do with a farm truck sold at a Ford dealership in central Wyoming. The third is what exactly is in this engine that makes it still run on farms and job sites today, 4 decades after it came off the production line in Indianapolis. To answer all 3, start with what International Harvester was and what it was doing in 1981 when it handed Ford the keys to its engine plant. In 1981, Ford Motor Company signed a supply agreement with International Harvester valued at $500 million. At the moment of signing, International Harvester was restructuring $4.15 billion in debt with 225 creditor banks and had posted a combined 3-year loss of $2.4 billion, the largest 3-year corporate loss in American history at the time. The engine produced by that agreement is the 6.9-liter IDI V8. It displaces 420 cubic inches. The block is cast nodular iron. The main bearing caps use 4 bolts each. The crankshaft is forged steel. Each piston is cooled by oil jets directed at the crown from inside the block. The camshaft and injection pump are gear-driven. The Stanadyne DB2 rotary injection pump is fully mechanical. No electronic control unit of any kind governs its operation. International Harvester manufactured military tactical vehicles for the United States military from 1941 through 1961, including the M5H 6x6 cargo trucks deployed by United States Navy and United States Marine Corps units starting in 1942. Ford received more than 300,000 units of the 6.9-liter IDI alone. Combined production of the 6.9-liter and its successor, the 7.3-liter IDI, reached approximately 1.5 million engines. Ford put a commercial fleet diesel designed by a military truck manufacturer into a pickup truck and told no one. The story of why starts not in Dearborn, but in an Indianapolis factory, where a company called International Harvester was building the best engine of its corporate life, while the institution it belonged to came apart around it. International Harvester in 1979 was one of the oldest industrial corporations in America. The company that grew from Cyrus McCormick's mechanical reaper in the 1840s had spent 150 years expanding from farm equipment into construction machinery, commercial trucks, and school bus chassis. By 1979, it reported record sales of $8.4 billion and record profits of $370 million. The machines that fed the American interior and a significant share of the trucks that moved its freight carried the International Harvester name. That was the last good year. In 1977, the International Harvester Board hired Archie McArdle as chairman and chief executive officer. McArdle came from Ford Motor Company and Xerox with a mandate to cut costs and modernize the business. His compensation package included a salary of $460,000, a signing bonus of $1.5 million, and a personal loan from the company of $1.8 million. A loan that would be forgiven outright if McArdle improved International Harvester's financial performance beyond the average of its 6 main competitors. He moved immediately. He announced plans to cut $640 million in spending and an $879 million plant modernization program. By 1979, the results looked like validation. Then McArdle decided to force a showdown with the United Auto Workers over mandatory overtime and work rule changes. On November 1, 1979, International Harvester announced that Archie McArdle's $1.8 million loan had been converted to a gift as a reward for the company's financial performance. The same day, 35,000 United Auto Workers members walked off the job. The strike that began the following morning lasted 172 days, the longest United Auto Workers strike in union history at the time. The cost to International Harvester was between $400 million and $600 million in lost profits. Short-term debt climbed from $442 million to more than $1 billion. Fiscal year 1980 produced a loss of $397 million. The stock dividend was suspended for the first time in 71 years. The spiral that followed was relentless. International Harvester posted a loss of $635.7 million in fiscal 1981. The combined losses from 1979 through 1982 totaled $2.4 billion, the largest 3-year corporate loss in American history at the time. In March 1981, International Harvester defaulted on its short-term loans. Emergency negotiations opened with 225 creditor banks to restructure $4.15 billion in debt. Simultaneously, in the engine division in Indianapolis, International Harvester engineers completed the prototype testing on a new V8 diesel. It passed every evaluation. Production tooling was ready. The engine was ahead of schedule. The $500 million Ford supply contract was signed the same year the company was asking 225 banks not to call in their loans. In May 1982, after authorizing $6 million in bonuses to salaried managers while simultaneously requesting $200 million in wage concessions from the UAW, Archie McArdle was fired by the board of directors. The company's creditor banks had been pressing for it. In 1984, International Harvester sold its agricultural division, 150 years of tractors, combines, and the Farmall name, to Tenneco for $488 million. The original business went to the parent company of J.I. Case. In 1986, what remained was renamed Navistar International Corporation. The words International Harvester were now Tenneco's legal property, transferred with the farm equipment. The engineers who designed the engine that Ford was putting in F-350s no longer worked for a company called International Harvester. They worked for Navistar, inside buildings that used to carry a different name. The engine they built was rolling off Ford dealer lots under a Ford badge. Their name was on nothing. The company that could no longer call itself what it had always been was still keeping Ford's truck line alive. The 6.9-liter ID, I borrowed its block architecture from IH's MV446 Industrial Gas V8, the engine that had been powering school buses and government fleet vehicles since 1975. This was not a conversion of that gas engine. It was a purpose-built diesel on commercial tooling, with every significant engineering decision made for a different operating environment than the pickup truck aisle at a Ford dealership. Begin with the main bearing caps. In a standard consumer truck engine of the early 1980s, the crankshaft was held in place by 2-bolt caps. The 6.9-liter IDI used 4-bolt caps, the same specification found in commercial fleet diesels and marine engines. General Motors' competing 6.2-liter Detroit diesel, introduced in General Motors pickup trucks 1 year earlier, used 2-bolt mains. 2 bolts is adequate for a diesel in normal duty. 4 bolts is what an engineer specifies when the engine will run at sustained full throttle loads, day after day, on routes that cannot accommodate a breakdown. The crankshaft is forged steel, not cast iron. A forged crank resists fatigue under the kind of torsional stress a loaded grain wagon generates across 100 miles of Wyoming 2-lane at full throttle, the kind of run where the next mechanic is 60 miles behind the driver and the next one is 60 miles ahead. The pistons are cooled by oil jets. Inside the block, pressurized engine oil is directed at the underside of each piston crown through squirt nozzles during operation. In a naturally aspirated diesel running hard through a Texas August, those jets are the difference between an engine that survives the season and one that has to find out whether it would have. The camshaft and injection pump are both gear-driven, not a belt, not a chain. A timing belt fails silently without adequate warning before it goes. International Harvester chose gear mesh because these engines were going into trucks where a silent failure on a county road at midnight has no good resolution for 60 miles in either direction. The injection pump is a Stanadyne DB2 rotary mechanical unit. No electronic control module governs it. A screwdriver inserted in the correct adjustment port on the side of the pump changes the fuel delivery rate. A diesel mechanic in a ranch equipment yard can tune this engine's fuel delivery with basic tools because International Harvester's engineers knew exactly where it was going to run. General Motors' 6.2-liter diesel had 30% less horsepower than the 6.9-liter IDI when both were new, because the two companies had completely different definitions of what a diesel engine in a pickup truck was supposed to do. These engines are still on the road, working, not restored. A 1986 F350 with 312,000 miles on its original 6.9-liter IDI is not a collector piece in a climate-controlled bay. It is somebody's working truck. The mechanics who pull these engines for overhaul know what they are the moment the block comes up on the stand. The 4 bolt main caps tell them everything they need to know about who built this and what it was built to survive. Ford's marketing for the 6.9-liter IDI consisted of a valve cover that said diesel. International Harvester went unmentioned. The buyer who wrote a check for the diesel option in 1983 received no information about what was inside. The engine's reputation built itself through the absence of breakdowns in situations where a breakdown had consequences. A cattle rancher pulling a loaded gooseneck trailer from a feed yard outside Amarillo to a sale barn outside Lubbock, 250 miles in August heat, is not testing an engine. He is doing a job the mortgage depends on. The oil-cooled pistons are not a talking point in his cab. They are the reason he arrives on time. The forged crankshaft is the reason the engine is still running when 2 other trucks have come and gone. 1.5 million engines those engineers built carry no company name on the block. F250 and F350 trucks with the 6.9-liter and 7.3-liter ID I currently sell for between $8,000 and $20,000 depending on condition. The buyers who never knew the company's name are holding trucks that appreciate, while modern diesels with DEF systems depreciate as they leave the lot. The 7.3-liter IDI followed in 1988, and the Power Stroke, direct injection and electronic controls replaced it in mid-1994. The mechanical IDI era ended there. These engines have no computer and no digital monitoring, which makes them visible in ways that create regulatory exposure for the entire class. Incidents involving modified pre-OBD2 diesel trucks have been used as legislative leverage against the broader category these vehicles belong to. The exemption protecting them in most states depends on there remaining a small enough population that targeted regulation is not worth the political cost. If your 6.9 or 7.3 IDI is still running, put the mileage in the comments. In 1983, a rancher in Laramie, Wyoming wrote a check for a truck that could do one job. He did not know the engine was designed by the company that built Marine Corps cargo trucks in 1942, that those engineers were negotiating with 225 banks the year they built it, or that the company would sell its name to survive and keep building anyway. The engine did not know any of that. It knew how to run. These trucks are still out there, and the engines in them are still running. In January 2026, the Department of Justice announced it would no longer pursue criminal charges against diesel emissions modifications. The criminal risk is gone. The civil penalties remain up to $45,268 per vehicle under EPA authority. California, Colorado, and New York maintain independent state enforcement. The Department of Justice memo does not touch. What that shift means for owners of pre-computer diesel trucks like these, that is the next file.